Ask Mixing with Mike. What is the best way to format my mix for mastering? This is a question that came to me recently by somebody who was trying to figure out how they should bounce their tracks. And the primary advice is actually pretty simple. When you format your mix or print your mix for mastering, there's a couple of basic things that you want to keep in mind. One is that you don't want the threshold or the highest peak level to be right at zero. You want to leave like about 3 dB or so of actual headroom at the top of your mix. So essentially, when you print the mix, you want it to have that peak signal be at about -3. And if it goes a little higher than that, that's okay. Because otherwise, what will happen is when the mastering engineer gets it, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to pull down the gain. So if you have the ability to adjust that or make that happen at the mix, and that's where you begin. When you set the output of the mix, generally the rule of thumb is that you print the mix at the same sample rate and bit depth of the session. Because if you actually print your mix at a higher sample rate, it's not going to sound any better than your existing session. And then that will be confusing to the mastering engineer. So primarily, if you say, for example, you run your whole session at 48 kilohertz 24-bit, then print your mix at 48 kilohertz 24-bit. Don't dither it down to 16-bit 44.1, even though that would be the primary ending format if it's formatted and being sent out for CD. So the focus of this is really all about making sure that the mix is at the quality that your session is running at. And this way, when the mastering engineer receives the files, they have a more educated starting place for the song. So usually, whenever I see a mix that comes in at 44.1 16-bit, I go back to the mix engineer or whoever printed the mix and I say, okay, is that what your session sample rate is? Or did you dither it down? And quite often, they ended up dithering it down in order to send it to me thinking that's what it was going to end up. Let the mastering engineer do that in the mastering process. The reason for that is that the mastering engineer may even upsample your existing mix so that all the processors they apply are actually more accurate within the confines of what they're doing. And at the very, very, very last stage, then the very last thing you do is to dither it down from 24-bit or 32-bit or whatever it is down to 16-bit. So you want to preserve all of that bit depth throughout all of the processing of the mastering. And then at the very, very end stage, the last thing that you do, you bring it down to 16-bit, and that will preserve the audio quality for that. Okay, so there's our Ask Mixing with Mike question on the best way to format a mix for mastering.